Nikki Freeman was born in either 1999 or 2000. If we assume that she's 24 years old in Obsession, which she is in the script, plus the actress Indy Navarrete was 24 when Obsession was made, she would be 24 during the events of the film, which take place in late July or early August of 2024. It seems Nikki had a troubled childhood, causing her to have meltdowns during school and earning her the nickname Freaky Nikki, which other kids used to bully her.
Be playfully mean with her. Like, hey, remember when you used to get bullied, everybody called you Freaky Nikki?
I think her erratic behavior probably stems from two places. First, a poor relationship with her father.
Her dad in Washington, she doesn't care about.
I thought she hated her dad.
The effects of an absent father are well documented in psychology. Not to get too into the weeds of science this early in the video, but this 2025 meta-analysis on a father's impact on social and emotional development states that father involvement is closely and positively linked to children's social emotional development, playing a crucial role in fostering emotional well-being, social competence, and emotion regulation in early childhood. In other words, kids are more likely to misbehave when there's no father in the picture. If you watch a lot of horror history, you've heard this one before, in everyone from Tiffany Valentine in the Chucky franchise to Carrie White from the universe of Stephen King, and more recently Maxine from the Maxine trilogy. They all had absent fathers and all suffered from the behavior issues that come with that. In some cases, this manifests as mental illness, which may include borderline personality disorder, which, as you will learn in this video, is likely what the school-aged bullies were referring to when they called her Freaky Nikki. If you've never encountered borderline personality disorder, it's a condition associated with intense, unstable relationships, impulsive behavior, and displaying extreme emotions. People with BPD will go from thinking someone close to them is perfect to thinking that they don't care at all in the blink of an eye. But the effects of borderline and an absentee father don't stop after childhood and can affect everything from her relationships with men to causing wild mood swings, destructive behavior, and so much more. To learn just where Nikki's freaky side really came from, the crazy fan theory stirring up obsession discourse, the untold secret rules of the One Wish Willow, the meaning of Nikki's unhinged attempt at writing, and how one tiny detail hidden on an envelope is the key to understanding this entire film, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Horror History. I wish you were subscribed to my channel with notifications on. Obsession is the sophomore feature film by director Curry Barker, creator of the sketch comedy and horror short channel That's a Bad Idea, where he produced over 70 videos in a 9-year period. Barker's fascination with the careful what you wish for concept was demonstrated in an early sketch called The Genie with Stupid Wishes.
What is that? That is wheat bread and a tomato.
My mom can make a better sandwich than that.
You didn't ask for a good sandwich.
After moving to LA for college, he met Cooper Tomlinson, who plays Ian in Obsession and Seven in Barker's first feature, Milk and Cereal. While that found footage debut film seemed to mostly use actors that he'd worked with before, Obsession was the first project that had some budget behind it. British film producer James Harris reached out after seeing Barker's short film, The Chair. Harris wanted to adapt The Chair into a feature, but Barker instead pitched Obsession, and Harris slowly started to see why he was so passionate about it. The $750,000 budget for Obsession may not sound huge for a movie, but it was about 1,000 times bigger than the budget for Milk and Cereal, affording them a formal casting process where Indy Navarrete sent in an impressive audition tape, but totally fumbled the next part.
I went in for a Zoom read. It was awful. Well, because I felt like I knew where I wanted to take it, but my body just wasn't reacting. I think I was in a space personally where I was so shut off from my own emotions, and with Nikki, you need all of them.
Thankfully, she got one more chance during a chemistry read where she poured everything into her performance, winning her the part.
Preparing the role was really fun. I mean, we got to watch a lot of fun movies and kind of pick and choose like a puzzle what we wanted in the film and moments that we took inspiration from and then made them our own. I think Pearl was a really big one.
Training on the performance of the most psychotic BPD girl in recent cinema is a telling clue about what her characters represent. And yes, that was a plural characters, as Indy was technically tasked with playing 2 characters in the film. But in order to unpack that, we've got to take it back to the origins of her relationship with Bear. Given that Bear remembers when Nikki was teased for being Freaky Nikki, we know that she was still a social outcast when Bear moved to her hometown of Well, that's actually a good question. Where do they live? Bear's grandmother has a pill bottle from Alabama. Nikki's recent Instagram posts are geotagged to Ohio, even though there's a palm tree in the photo. There are also mountains in the background of the music store that they work at. The local hospital, St. Luke's, is in Easton, which suggests Easton, Pennsylvania, and Bear's license plate says Georgia, which is actually our answer because Sarah's college acceptance letter confirms that they live in Atlanta, Georgia. The pill bottle and Instagram post could have been collected on vacations. So Bear moves to Atlanta, and he's the new kid. He's kind of an outcast too, we can assume. And it seems that he and Nikki bonded over that.
You were the only person that was nice to me when I moved here.
It seems like they were probably in bands together, because Bear tells a story about how she helped him out when he forgot his mouthpiece in Mr. Lando's class. Lando, by the way, is one of a pair of Star Wars references in the film. Lando is a nod to the contraband smuggler Lando Calrissian, and there's also a reference to Greedo.
Douchebags, we're going to Greedos.
Greedo is the alien bounty hunter who is most famous for the fact that his scene was altered in the special edition of the film. Originally, when Star Wars came out, it was Han Solo that shot Greedo first, but that was changed to Han shooting back at Greedo in self-defense to make his character more sympathetic. There's kind of a similar gaslighting that goes on in Obsession, where Bear tries to make it look like Nikki came onto him first, but we'll get there in a little bit. Basically, the two became very close. Nikki felt Bear was the only person she could talk to about her dreams to become a writer, and Bear felt that she was the only one that he'd share his emotional pain with, leading him to develop a crush on her. So early on, there's already this idea of codependency, putting Bear in a situation where he didn't want to confess because he was afraid to risk losing the friendship. This got more complicated when the two became part of a little friend group, consisting of their coworkers at Castle's Music, Sarah and Ian. It's not known when this job started, but I'm going to assume they were working together by July 8th, 2020, when these photos were taken and labeled as the Bass Clef Bandits B Squad. The friend group dynamics probably made it harder for either of them to make a move on one another, because Sarah ends up having a crush on Bear, and Ian ends up having a secret crush on Nikki. So if someone made a move, it potentially put more than their own feelings at risk of being hurt. And that's not even getting into Nikki's self-destructive behavior. We don't know exactly when this happens, but I'm guessing it was around this time that Nikki started taking methylene dioxomethamphetamine. Okay, who named this? That's a horrible name. Now I see why they call it Molly. This is basically a psychedelic substance that can make the user feel energetic and alert and increase the sense of well-being, warmth, and openness towards others, while also having dangerous side effects like high blood pressure, nausea, vomiting, restlessness, body temperature flux, and occasionally death. Long-term use can also cause heart problems, liver damage, panic attacks, poor sleep, depression, paranoia, and memory problems. Basically, very dangerous stuff. But it's not entirely surprising given her mental health issues. Substance abuse is very common in individuals suffering from BPD, affecting 78% of them.
Gerald, I'll be honest with you, I just don't think substance abuse is my thing.
According to Addiction Center, the use often starts as a way of coping with feelings of emptiness, providing temporary relief, but causing the person to feel worse later on. This causes them to chase that temporary relief again, which turns into a cycle of addiction. I want to read this passage from Addiction Center because it ties perfectly into what happens to Nikki later on. When borderline personality disorder co-occurs with an addiction, referred to as dual diagnosis, the effects of both are magnified. Impulsive and destructive behaviors, mood swings, depression, lack of concern for safety and health, and instability are some of the symptoms that can worsen when these disorders are simultaneous. Remember that. We're gonna talk about it. It seems that she was able to get a handle on things though, because her friends seem to believe that she stopped using it before the events of the movie. Now, at one point, Sarah claims that Ian and Nikki were hooking up on and off for about 2 years, which would have been from 2022 to 2024. We'd never find out if that's true or not. It could be a lie that Sarah is using to get Bear to choose her instead, but I think there are little clues to say that it's actually true. Nikki's IG post is liked by Cooper Tomlinson, the actor who plays Ian. Nikki steals his hat as they're leaving the bar, and at the end, when Bear asks for help to cancel his wish and offers to let Ian be with Nikki, Ian starts to say, "I was gonna tell you," which all but confirms it. We just don't know if he was gonna tell him about being with Nikki or just the fact that he had feelings for her. Through all of this though, Nikki continued to try to be there for Bear as a friend, calling and sitting on the phone with him in silence when his grandma passed away in June 2024. But it's left deliberately ambiguous whether or not Bear's feelings towards Nikki are reciprocated, as explained by the director.
The version of Nikki that we're presented with doesn't really like him that much and seems to have friend-zoned him. But I will say, you know, when writing this, I kind of asked myself, what if Nikki actually kind of does have a crush on Bear? And you can see in that look, she almost was a little disappointed that he didn't just say it.
Clearly, Barker doesn't want to give a definitive answer. That way the discussion is more interesting. I've actually seen a lot of takes on this, because when you're researching a video, you end up getting a lot of posts in your feed about the topic against your will, but they seem to be pretty black and white. It's either that she was completely disinterested in him, or that she was crazy and she was leading him on the whole time. So let's look at the actual evidence in the movie. Nikki seems to give off a lot of mixed signals in the opening of Obsession, which I'm gonna say takes place on July 18th, 2024. We know the general time frame from Sarah's letter at the end, which probably took a couple days to arrive via snail mail after the 25th. We know we are at least 7 days into July thanks to Bear's LLM chat history, and we know trivia night is on Thursdays, so July 18th makes the most sense. Let's start with the evidence that she loves him. Number 1, the contact on his phone for her is named Nikki blowing kiss emoji in love emoji Freeman. I don't think it would make sense for him to enter in her contact like this as a reference to his own secret crush on her, primarily because she would eventually see it. If they were already dating, then maybe he'd throw some emojis in there, but even then, that's more of a girl thing. Us guys use masculine emojis, like the skull emoji, the bat emoji, the spider emoji. Okay, fine, maybe that's just me using all the spooky ones. But this Nikki contact was clearly something that she did when entering her own phone number into his phone, and that could definitely be seen as flirtation. When Bear isn't planning on going to the trivia night, she specifically says she wanted to see him.
Aw, Bear, no. I wanted to see you tonight.
And when she does show up, she flirts with him in a pretty overt way.
I like a man who's in touch with his feminine.
What?
On the car ride home, she says Bear is the only one she can talk to about her personal stuff, but the most convincing evidence is when she puts him on the spot.
Do you like me?
What?
Because if you do, now's the time to tell me.
I think he fumbles pretty badly by not confessing right here, because if she wasn't interested in him at all, then why would she even ask this? It would be extraordinarily cruel to make him admit his feelings for her just in order to shut him down. Then, of course, there's her looking disappointed when he says that he likes her as a friend. Now, let's look at the other side. She loves him and not. In a discussion with Ian, Bear mentions that whenever they go out for drinks, Nikki invites Ian.
Yeah, I've grabbed drinks sometimes. She always invites you.
Suggesting that she doesn't want to invite the atmosphere of a date by making it one-on-one. Later that day, she reveals that she's planning to quit her job at the music store to pursue her writing, specifically telling Bear that they're running out of time, which probably means that she'll move away. Which is a sign that she's probably not thinking about starting a relationship with Bear anytime soon. Plus, she says she's not happy at the music store, which is probably more just about her career than her love life, but if she wanted to be with Bear, she'd probably clarify. Then of course, there's this.
Get your girl home safe.
Ew, don't say it like that.
Saying ew was probably unnecessary, but I think it gets the point across. But I think the biggest evidence that Nikki does not have feelings for Bear is the fact that he has to make the wish in the first place. Bear gets this novelty item from a magic shop called the One Wish Willow, and uses it to wish that Nikki loved him more than anyone in the world. It doesn't matter whether or not he believed that the wish would work. It's almost as if deep down he knows that she doesn't feel the same way about him, and he needs this wish to come true if he wants to have a chance with her. There's also one more thing, more of a filmmaking thing than a character thing, but the night that Bear is planning to ask her out, he looks at the time on this orange Kit Kat clock. The Kit Kat clock was originally designed in 1932, intended to be a bright spot of optimism during the Great Depression, and is often used symbolically in media, so its inclusion here could suggest that Bear was being overly optimistic about a dismal situation. There are other moments from the trivia night that could be interpreted either way, like her getting nervous when he says that he has a gift for her, the way she reacts to her own offer to console him after the death of his cat.
You know you can always call me when it does.
Where she closes her eyes as if she'd said something that she shouldn't have. We don't know if she's embarrassed about sounding corny in front of Bear, or if she immediately regrets making the offer to have an emotional call with him out of fear that he'll get more attached. She also claims that she needs to feel love if she wants to bring the book that she's writing during her downtime at the music store to life, but considering that we find out her story is not a romance.
So it's a romance.
No, it's not a romance, it's a love story.
Isn't that the same thing?
It's hard to say what kind of love she was seeking. And as we would find out in meta-cinematic fashion with Obsession, no, it is not the same thing. But taking all of this evidence into account, I think the most reasonable conclusion is that she kind of likes Bear, but not enough to take the leap into a relationship, which would shake up their friend group and potentially put her dreams of becoming an author on hold to stay with him at a job that she hates, hence the friend zone, which appears to line up with how the character was approached.
Me and Curry played with the idea of whenever we did certain takes, we played one where like she is super interested, we did another where she wasn't, and so in the editing process, kind of marrying those together to also see it from Bear's perspective of like, how does she feel? So ultimately, because it is from Bear's perspective, we don't really know, but speaking as Nikki, I think that there's a little inclination of like, you would treat me right.
Really?
To a certain extent. I just want to emphasize that.
It's almost like they're still kind of in character in the interviews. Anyway, Nikki's wish for a major life change comes true, but not in the way that she wanted. Because Bear's wish for Nikki to love him more than anyone in the world also comes true, but not in the way that he wanted either. So now we've got to talk about the One Wish Willow.
It's supposed to just like knock you on your ass. It's supposed to be nuts.
Is it so dead on arrival that maybe it makes you could make somebody do anything that you wanted them to do in the world?
Sorry, this whole like control someone and make them do whatever you want is kind of creeping me out, Grant.
Bear first got it from a magic shop where it's advertised as a way to amaze your friends and make your dreams come true. If you look up One Wish Willow, you'll find the website, and although you can't actually buy anything there, it does contain some additional lore, warning users to think carefully before wishing and stating the limitations. Cannot grant wishes involving time manipulation, resurrection, immortality, or creating more One Wish Willows. Tabby Cat Curiosities is not responsible for wish misinterpretations. Use at your own risk. Users assume all responsibility for wish outcomes. There's also a commercial that specifically warns against using it if experiencing insecurity or extreme obsession.
Wishes may cause unexpected behavior, violent tendencies, and self-mutilation.
And the end of the commercial has a phone number, which you can call and hear the voicemail message of the hotline guy from the movie.
Hey, you've reached the One Wish Willow hotline. Unfortunately, we're not liable for any unintended things that might have happened to you or your loved ones. That includes property damages, psychological distress, emotional trauma, extreme personality changes, deeply disturbing displays of love, bodily harm, death, or anything resembling possession and stuff like that. It's all there in the fine print, but maybe you didn't read it. Most people don't. If you need further assistance, well, I hope you can find it because there's not much I can really do. Good luck.
So from all this extra lore information, we can gather that this wish misinterpretation, as the website puts it, seems to be a pretty common thing. Instead of the obvious solution, where Bear's wish simply causes Nikki's affection for him to increase, the wish replaces her with a totally new obsessed entity that takes over and lives inside of Nikki's body. I'll refer to the new version as Wish Nikki and the original, who is now trapped in some kind of limbo purgatory, as Real Nikki. And Wish Nikki is actually the perfect name, because we already use the word wish to refer to cheap Chinese knockoffs of trusted name brand products. The analogy is perfect. The way Wish Nikki acts is ditzy and saccharine, clearly distinct from the sarcastic cool girl that we've come to know up to this point. And the analogy is also perfect for what Wish Nikki represents subtextually. This is the manifestation of BPD taking over her life. And it's also part of the reason that the horror of obsession resonated with so many people. It's estimated that BPD affects up to about 1.4% of the population. So when Obsession came out, online support groups were flooded with discourse about the movie. In particular, groups like BPD Loved Ones, which offer to aim support to those who have endured challenges or abuse stemming from a relationship with a person with BPD. Now for 2 hours of disclaimers so that I don't get a million of the same comment. No, not all people with BPD are dangerous or scary. Most of them are a bigger threat to themselves than they are to others. The reason that Nikki and Annie Wilkes and Pearl and Lena Clamor are portrayed as scary is because they are characters in a horror movie. That is literally the point. If you do not like horror movies, you are watching the wrong channel. And you suck. Also, there's Sean Bateman and Nora from iCarly. Not really horror movies, but it is understood that these are fictional characters, not realistic representatives of BPD. Next disclaimer. I am about to read some accounts of BPD loved ones who related to the movie. This does not mean that I am a Bear apologist or that I am trying to get you to sympathize with Bear. Just because he suffers from his relationship with Wish Nikki doesn't mean he did no wrong. I think a big reason that I liked Obsession is that all of the characters exist somewhere in the moral gray, which makes them feel more complex and realistic than what you typically see in American movies.
That's what I loved about this whole project, just that gray, morally gray zone. It's very kind of ambiguous.
So with that all being said, I want to highlight some of the reactions. Obsession movie will help you get over your ex or re-traumatize you. Just came out of the movie and I am convinced it's about a borderline relationship. The intense mood swings and crying that immediately turned into angry screaming was giving me flashbacks. Also, the constant "I love you more than anything in the world" statements, along with the constant jealousy and lack of privacy given to Bear, was all too familiar. Great movie overall, but it definitely brought back some unpleasant memories. Even people suffering from BPD were cringing in terror as they saw themselves in Nikki's behavior. I have BPD, and I related to Nikki on a level that I'm not sure how to feel about. These comments and posts go on and on, with people feeling seen with just about every aspect of Wish Nikki. I'll come back to a few of them, but I want to talk about the symptoms we see in Nikki as we go through her timeline. Immediately after the wish is made, Wish Nikki comes back to the car and invites Bear to come inside, stating that she just lost her cats, even though it was Bear's cat who just died. I interpreted this as her seeing them as a pair before it was even appropriate to. It's like when you go on a first date and she's already talking about what you guys are gonna name your kids. Also, doing or saying anything to get you to stay is a major BPD thing. The #1 symptom of BPD is fear of abandonment. Nikki was abandoned by her father, and this anxiety has extended to her relationships with men. The list of symptoms comes directly from DSM-5, the standard manual for recognizing mental health disorders in most countries. And the next symptom would be apparent moments later. Shortly after Wish Nikki takes over under the MO of loving Bear more than anyone in the world, the real Nikki temporarily fights back and regains control of herself.
No, I'm not. Wait, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
Are you okay?
I'm acting so weird.
This happens several times throughout the story, showing us that Nikki's battle with her mental illness is a literal battle going on inside of her. Wish Nikki and real Nikki grappling for control. This switching causes her to temporarily disconnect from reality, another symptom of BPD. This account from the girlfriend of a person with BPD shows how well the supernatural element mimicked her real experience. Yes, it reminded me of my ex-partner with BPD. The constant changes of mood swings. Sometimes I would feel like my ex was possessed or something. It was like having two different personalities like in the movie. One moment he'd be okay, next he would be all creepy. Nikki basically forces him to spend more time with her, refusing to take no for an answer, even making up a lie about how her dad is dying and shedding fake tears to elicit sympathy, until he finally agrees to take her home with him, and it doesn't stop there. Once she's in, she wants him to sleep in the bed with her so she doesn't get in her head all night. By the way, when he agrees to stay with her, the clock, which moments earlier read 12:08, has randomly switched to 16:55. It feels too deliberate to be a simple continuity error. However, according to the prop master of the movie, it actually was just a mistake.
I really love all of your guys' theories and analyses and everything of the film, but I also just wanted to say that we know about the clock, and it was a mistake, but one that we couldn't fix because the clock was broken, and it was 1 a.m. during reshoots, and that's okay. It's okay to have mistakes in movies, and for them to not mean anything.
Okay, but why didn't you just fix it in post? That's an easy fix. I can fix it right now. Look at that. Anyway, mistake or not, I prefer this theory from a YouTuber named LP Longmire, claiming that 1655 was the year of a court ruling that determined that a man named John Kaser was legally considered a slave in Virginia. Kind of like how Wish Nikki is a slave to the wish of Bear. Referencing the year of a court filing like that actually ties in perfectly to a theory that I already had, which we'll get into later in this story. Anyway, once Nikki gets Bear onto the bed with her, it takes exactly 60 seconds for it to escalate to her kissing him. To which I was immediately like, if you liked her for so long, why would you risk ruining it by hooking up when she's clearly mentally distraught? Like, assuming he didn't realize he had actually created a second Nikki yet, why would you want to start the relationship on the foundations of her dad having cancer? So how did you guys meet? Her dad died and she coped by getting with me for short-term comfort. It's the first of several instances of Bear enabling her BPD to go unchecked because basically he seems to like the idea of being with her more than he actually likes her. Her uncharacteristic behavior would continue into early the next morning when she prepared breakfast for him and created a memorial out of his dead cat, which he still has not buried for some reason. He drives the two to work where she obsessively stares at him the entire day, causing Ian to wonder if she's relapsed. She also leaves her purse in Bear's car the entire day. At first, I thought she was just a dumb for this, but we later come to see that Wish Nikki is basically helpless like an infant without Bear's assistance. And I've come to believe that it's because Wish Nikki was literally born yesterday when the wish was made. Sure, she can walk and talk, but she's entirely codependent. Another aspect of this that I noticed was that Nikki never drives. It's always Bear or Ian giving her a ride. The reason why is never addressed, but given her substance issues in the past, it's not unlikely that she did something to get her license revoked. One of the BPD symptoms is impulsive or self-damaging behavior, and reckless driving is actually listed as an example in DSM-5. One of the other examples is substance abuse, which comes up later that night when Nikki picks out her best outfit to come over and apologize for her behavior the night before, claiming that she was on MDMA, which is another name for Molly. Remember what I said earlier about dual diagnosis? When BPD and substance addiction happen at the same time and the effects of both are magnified? I don't think it's any coincidence that things get crazy after Wish Nikki, the personification of the disorder, mentions that her behavior was affected by MDMA. This is where she claims to know that he's into her and says that she's been feeling the same way since Christmas, which would have been about 7 months before. It's hard to say for sure, but it feels like this is just Wish Nikki telling him what he wants to hear. After this, we see a montage of the beginning of their relationship. We don't know exactly how much time passes, but it's not enough time for him to bury his cat. They make breakfast twice during the montage, so it could be as little as 2 days. At one point, she shows him an AI-generated image with a caption that says, "I want to wear your skin as a sweater." So obviously that's a red flag. The fact that she's consuming AI-generated content, I mean. But actually, we don't know the true nature of what Wish Nikki is, but she kind of is an artificial intelligence in a way, maybe just not a man-made one. They also sell ocarinas at this music store, and this guitar tuner, which looks an awful lot like a slingshot. Which is funny, because the only reason I didn't finish this video sooner is the obscene amount of times I've watched the teaser for the Ocarina of Time remake. Someone needs to grab one of those ocarinas and play the Song of Double Time so 2026 can hurry up and get here. Anyway, the first scene after the montage is a dinner date, where Nikki's borderline behavior starts to become more apparent. She's wearing a bee necklace, possibly a B for bear, and gives him a gem called a tiger's eye, which was an heirloom passed down from her mom. A very uncomfortable gift, and it's kind of on the same level as the cat comment. The perceived closeness of their relationship is too high considering that they've only been dating for less than a week, which is reiterated moments later when she claims that she loves him more than anyone in the world. Again, they've known each other for a while, but you don't say this after dating for 4 days. So she goes from that directly into a complete meltdown when he tries to confront her on her lie about her dad's health.
No, don't do that!
If it were me, this is where she would get dumped, but that's not what happens, because Bear is willfully ignoring another BPD symptom, huge mood swings. She makes a complete scene in the restaurants, like a Gen Alpha kid whose Kid Slop tablet ran out of battery. DSM says that these mood swings can last hours or even sometimes days. I came across this post reply of a guy who is defending the film's dramatization of a real mental health condition by comparing it to his own experience. So I had a past relationship with someone that had BPD, and that one scene where they're in the restaurant and she stands up yelling and making a scene gave me an immense amount of anxiety. There were so many small examples of the things my ex did throughout the movie. So I don't see this movie as stigmatizing or anything. It is obviously a movie, so anyone can have their own interpretation of it. I just found it hit really close to home, and a lot of movies focus on depression or sadness, but I've never seen one tackle BPD. But Nikki's scariest behavior during the day doesn't even hold a candle to the emotional crises that take place after the sun has set. That night, Nikki stands in the corner watching him sleep, wearing his sweater because it smells like him. Then her mood swings, and she starts crying because she doesn't like her dreams, and she worries that he doesn't love her as much as she loves him. The "I don't like my dreams" comment is interesting because we later find out that real Nikki can claw back some small amount of control while Wish Nikki is asleep. So the dream she's referring to may be a struggle for control, which, as we know, would be a metaphor for her trying and failing to get her mental health under control. In fact, every time real Nikki pops out and regains control, it's at night, and most of the craziest Wish Nikki behavior takes place at night. So that got me thinking, are real BPD symptoms actually worse at night? This is an interesting topic. Researchers have theorized that poor sleep may be a driver of emotional dysregulation for individuals with BPD, but that needs a little more research. It is literally just a theory, a BPD theory. However, there are a lot of personal anecdotes online that seem to agree that yes, things tend to get worse after dark, which feels like it makes sense. A lot of people get crankier when they get tired, and we are literally talking about a personality disorder. So yeah, it seems like Curry Barker really may have thought of everything. Another interesting wrinkle to this that I noticed was her tattoos. She has these Egyptian eye symbols, which are known as the Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus. In the ancient Egyptian religion, the Eye of Ra represents the sun, and the Eye of Horus represents the moon. I thought for sure that this must tie into the idea that Nikki's symptoms get worse at night, but just to be sure, I wanted to see if these tattoos were actually added for the movie, or if Indy Navarrete already had them.
I love getting random tattoos. The Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus, I have.
You had it before the movie?
I had it before the movie.
Are you kidding me?
On the One Wish Willow box, they're here.
That's bananas.
Isn't that crazy?
So I guess that's just another happy accident, like the 1655 on the digital clock. Also, I'm pretty sure Jimmy Kimmel thought that the One Wish Willow was a real thing.
This thing, yeah. Had you heard of this before? Or is this you were familiar with? Yeah, I wasn't familiar with this either.
Nikki's other comment during her 3 a.m. meltdown, "I feel like you don't love me as much as I do," is an example of one of the hallmark symptoms of BPD, a persistently unstable self-image, which is ironic considering we started with potentially the opposite issue, Bear's insecurity about her not loving him. By the way, Indy Navarrete cleared up rumors about a dancer being used to achieve the freaky body movements seen during her mental episodes, telling BuzzFeed, "We didn't have a choreographer, so the pop and locking was just me and Curry. Just doing it, and then him being like, no, I want it more like this, and then moving the hands in a certain way. I used to be a dancer, so that aided some of the process." Curry is no stranger to implementing this kind of uncanny choreography in his shorts, like in the mysterious mindbender Warnings. When Nikki finally does rejoin him in bed, he tries to create a little space, triggering this response. It's the beginning of one of her most frequent symptoms, her inability to control her anger. That night, she also cuts his hair, and in the morning, he discovers her on the couch, pretending or attempting to read a book which is upside down. I'm pretty sure the title printed on the cover here says The Art of Seduction. This is something I touched on a little bit earlier, but this is like a go-to tactic that comes up time and time again in BPD relationships, attempting to use physical intimacy to get the person to stay, or to distract from confrontation, or to artificially make them feel closer out of fear of abandonment. And right after reading this book, we see her do this. He's trying to talk to her about her behavior last night, and when she can't come up with a good explanation, she just kisses him instead to make the conversation go away. It works for the time being, but there are bigger issues that he doesn't have time to address, like the fact that she's taped the door shut to prevent him from leaving. Wait, why did she also tape the left side of the door? I love all the little details just showing how dumb Wish Nikki is. That's not the worst thing she did that morning though, because she also prepared Bear's lunch. How sweet. Except she fed him his own dead cat, so that's not very epic. And also, for the third time now, why do they still have the cat? I don't think there's really a good explanation for that, or why she does it, other than my idea earlier that Wish Nikki is like a newborn soul who just doesn't know any better than a baby. It's safe to say that anyone would be concerned if they saw how disturbed Nikki's state of mind is at this point. Ian, despite his own selfish motives, is seeing all kinds of red flags, and he doesn't even know more than a sliver of it.
You come to me saying Nikki's having like some fucking crazy mental breakdown or something and that she needs to get help, and now you're acting like, oh, no, we're in love, she's fucking fine.
Bear is accused of taking advantage of the situation, and instead of asking for help or basically doing anything that he should have, he hides all of the worsening behavior from the last 24 hours and lies about the situation, insisting Nikki is totally fine now. I don't want to get too much into Bear's psychology here in Nikki's video, but let me know if I should do that one next. But the part that's relevant here is that Bear's selfish behavior, letting Nikki suffer because he can't let go of his desire to have his dream girl, is preventing her from getting help. If you're wondering what the treatment for BPD is, it's basically a lot of talk therapy, so hiding her issues is actively hurting her. But in the context of obsession, that wouldn't work, considering Nikki's issue is a supernatural wish that replaced her soul with an alternate. But the talk therapy is an ongoing thing that takes years to make an improvement. There's no medication that you can jump on to make it go away, which feels like the point of the next scene, where Bear tries calling the One Wish Willow hotline and is basically told that there's nothing he can do. The guy on the other end of the line offers to let him talk to the real Nikki, and he just hears her screaming in agony. Whatever purgatory she's trapped in is obviously some kind of torture, and we would later find out just how agonizing that purgatory is. While Bear was away at work, Wish Nikki spent the entire day standing in place, waiting for him to come home, and he finds her covered in human ways. In the eyes of Curry Barker, this is what the movie is about more than anything.
Why did you want to tell this story and where did it come from?
You know, the idea of telling a story about how far codependency could go, it was just something that was intriguing to me. And then the device of be careful what you wish for is something I wanted to like push the boundaries of.
We also see that idea tested that night when Ian is hosting a party and basically challenges Bear to come without Nikki as a way of testing the health of their relationship.
If the relationship is healthy and it's not built on some codependency, dad dying, not dying, what the f ever, then she should have no fucking problem with you coming to a boys' night.
As it turns out, she's not fine with it. This moment struck a chord with a lot of people. Just watch the movie and it was way too relatable. There were scenes where I started tearing up from the trauma of my past, although recent relationship, especially the part about codependency and testing if it's a healthy relationship. The two fail Ian's test when Nikki shows up to the party anyway, and there are increasingly apparent signs of Nikki's mental instability. But there are subtle ones too. This time, instead of the bee necklace, Nikki is wearing this spiral necklace. Spirals are widely regarded as the universal sign for madness, so much so that in English we literally use the word spiraling when talking about a descent into madness. The box of the One Wish Willow is also covered in little symbols, one of which is this spiral, which means that it could be a sign that she's under the control of the wish. Or this could be another Ocarina of Time reference, because this necklace looks exactly like the Kokiri's emerald entrusted to the player by the Great Deku Tree after destroying the evil parasite poisoning the tree from within. Much like how Wish Nikki is the evil parasite that corrupted the real Nikki's body. Then again, if the alarm clock thing wasn't even intentional, this probably isn't a reference to Ocarina of Time. But there is a different fairy tale-like story that is definitely referenced in the same scene. Nikki reads an excerpt of her book, and it cryptically references the fact that Bear and Nikki's relationship is a sham created by Bear's wish. The book is like this weird incestual version of the fable Hansel and Gretel. "You're not my wife, Gretel," he said. "I'm more than your wife. I am your sister." This makes reference to the fact that Bear and Nikki's love was not originally a romantic love, but it was more like a sibling dynamic. But then she randomly became a romantic partner as a result of Bear's wish. Hansel flinched and reached for the door handle. I knew he would not leave this place. This references Bear getting scared by her obsessive behavior and trying to create distance, but not having the courage to end the relationship. Much like the moment where she taped the door shut and he just pretended that that wasn't insane person behavior and went on with his day. He would relent and choose to be inside me, like he had many nights before. If not, I would fillet his meaty forearm, roll it like a stick of licorice, and insert the flesh between my legs. Again, it shows that Bear would be better off breaking up with her, but he gets drawn back in by her seduction every time. He's making the selfish choice that benefits him in the moment. A love only the branch of a willow tree could conjure. "Brother, you will be inside me tonight." This is the most important part. It makes reference to the One Wish Willow itself. Basically, I think the branches of a willow tree are what provide the magic power to grant a wish. Only the willow could create a love this powerful. I don't know if this is Wish Nikki letting the mask slip a little bit, or if this is real Nikki fighting back and influencing the contents of Wish Nikki's writing as a cry for help. I think it's maybe a little bit of both, because we later find out that Wish Nikki is fully aware that she was created as a result of the wish.
You wanted this, you wished for this.
The drinking game continues with Bear drawing a block that instructs him to kiss the person on the left, which is Sarah. This turns Nikki into a human version of the frowning emoji. It's a very uncomfortable moment for everyone. I'd probably be like Joe. After unsuccessfully trying to play this off as a joke, we see a moment where the real Nikki briefly pops out and regains control, and she immediately tries to remove herself from the story with a broken bottle. This is the beginning of another BPD symptom, recurrent blank behavior such as blankicidal ideation. There is a hospital visit, but with Wish Nikki back in control, she refuses to be admitted. Back at Bear's house, she's back to her usual tactics, but he's starting to grow immune to them. She moves to try to kiss him while he's trying to have a serious conversation with her, and he stops her. She refers to herself as Freaky Nikki, a nickname that real Nikki hated, and he gets fed up when she tries the fake tears again. When he suggests some time apart, even just giving her his bed, she grabs a knife and threatens him with more of the behavior that caused a scene at the party, telling him that if she has the bed all to herself, she'll lay there until she slowly feels cold, like walking into a freezer. What she's describing is chronic feelings of emptiness, which is one of the last borderline symptoms on the list. But the perfect culmination of the BPD metaphor happens that night, after Wish Nikki has fallen asleep. As Bear sneaks out of bed to go talk to Sarah, an all-around dumb idea, mentally unstable girlfriend or not, I noticed that the hand draped over his chest as he wiggles out of bed is the one marked with the Eye of Horus, the one that represents the moon, the night, and the worst side of the One Wish Willow. As he's leaving the room, Nikki's voice calls out to him in a sleep talk and begs him to kill her. This is the real Nikki again, and she explains that Wish Nikki is asleep. Bear asks what would be so bad about being with him, to which she explains that she's never been with him. The person that he was with for this past week isn't a form of Nikki at all. It's a completely new entity created from his wish. This explains why every time the real Nikki pops out, she freaks out and doesn't seem to know where she is for a moment. She begs him to kill her, but he ignores her pleas, which ultimately leads to Wish Nikki waking up, realizing Bear is gone to see Sarah, finding them, and smashing Sarah's face into a brick. The way her hair covers her face in this scene, Wish Nikki has serious Sadako energy. Perhaps that's fitting, seeing as how Sadako Yamamura from Ringu is also someone who is trapped in a deep, dark place as a result of a man's desire. And speaking of which, after Sarah is killed, Bear is left holding her college acceptance letter, and we can see her address, 1973 Riley Ridge Road. 1973 immediately struck me as a number that sounds like a year, so I decided to look up major events from 1973 and discovered that this was the year of the landmark US Supreme Court decision in the Roe v. Wade case. In this case, the court ruled that the US Constitution protected the right of pregnant women to choose to have an abortion. This is oversimplifying it, but basically, a woman using the name Jane Roe sued her local Texas district attorney Henry Wade, arguing that her state's local laws, which made abortion completely illegal, were unconstitutional. With the help of her lawyers, she was able to establish a new legal precedent that stood for almost 50 years. The reasoning behind the court's decision was that pregnancy may force upon the woman a distressful life in future and could gravely impair the physical or mental health of the mother. This is where everything clicked for me. We just saw real Nikki beg Bear to terminate her life because of the suffering caused by this other entity that's taken over her body. An entity who, as we've seen throughout the entire story, is completely codependent, acts childishly, and constantly needs to be taken care of, almost like a newborn. And, also as we have seen throughout this episode, the other entity is a perfect representation of a serious mental health issue, embodying all of the textbook symptoms of borderline personality disorder. When Bear tried to contact the creator of the Willow, he was asked if he'd like to cancel his wish. In other words, abort the other entity. But then the guy went on to say that they don't really do that, because Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022, which lines up perfectly with when the script for Obsession was written, sometime between then and the end of 2023. And the reason Roe v. Wade was overturned was because a different Supreme Court case called Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization contradicted it, by explicitly saying that the Constitution does not mention or protect abortion, instead leaving it up to individual state laws. Think about that. One ruling contradicted another. Now, look what happens when Bear goes back to the magic shop looking for help.
I need to reverse it. Well, maybe, if someone else made a wish that contradicts your wish.
It all comes back to the envelope. But by then, it's too late. Nikki transports Sarah's body and uses her phone to spam Ian with texts, telling him to go over to their place so that she can take him out next. In the meantime, she builds Bear a shrine of candles, photos of them, and photos of him, and just a bunch of random objects like soda cans, a to-go cup, toilet paper rolls, a dental night guard, and this thing in the middle, which I can only assume is a sculpture of dried toothpaste backwash that Nikki dug back up from the drain. Basically, she's saving everything that has ever been inside of Bear's body, which just gets weirder the more that you think about it. It reminds me of Lena, the overly attached girlfriend meme from the 2010s. Doesn't spit or swallow, saves. Although it's barely visible in the film, pun intended, the prop master shared this photo of a doll Nikki created using cuts of Bear's work uniform, his badge, and the hair that she cut off while he was sleeping, which pairs nicely with the video of him sleeping, which she has playing on the TV for a nice little bit of evening ambiance. A pair of handcuffs hangs from the corner of the shrine, perhaps symbolizing how Nikki sees Bear as being locked into this relationship with her for life. When he sees her, she's a mess of the symptoms that we've gone over so far, covered in grime and hyperventilating as she inhales an illicit substance and exhales pure rage. Ian shows up and she eliminates him with a gun. The only way he's able to calm her down is by pretending that he still loves her more than anyone and promising that they'll be together forever. But when he sneaks away and locks himself in the bathroom, she goes completely ballistic on him, screaming expletives, then suddenly calming down and suggesting that they should break up. And this is the final, but one of the most important and dangerous symptoms of her borderline personality disorder, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships alternating between extreme idealization and devaluation. People with BPD will often get really close to someone, center their whole lives around that person, then invent some kind of perceived slight, resulting in a continual revolving door of romantic partners and best friends, and an always growing list of partners turned to enemies. But something catches Nikki's eye while Bear is in the bathroom. She finds the One Wish Willow and uses it to wish he would be just as obsessed with her. Although this works for a while, it's short-lived, as Bear has already OD'd and is removed from the story shortly thereafter, thus canceling his wish and finally releasing real Nikki from the purgatory that she'd been trapped in. Obsession ends with a pan down to the old TV that belonged to Bear's grandmother, which matches the unconventional aspect ratio of the movie that we just watched. It's Barker's way of reminding the audience that the film is a work of fiction, but its themes can teach us about real life. The One Wish Willow represents all of the shortcuts that today's world is full of. Bear creates his relationship out of a wish instead of building a real relationship with Nikki. Just like people are using AI instead of learning how to write or draw, how people are using steroids to build their bodies rather than hard work at the gym or discipline in the diet, or how most people will try to scam others rather than building a genuine customer base built on trust. These are all examples of shortcuts and can result in short-term gain, but long-term disaster. I'm reminded of Nikki giving money to the hobo at the beginning of the movie. It's something that could help that person in the short term, but it'll be spent immediately and does nothing to address the wider issue of homelessness. The moment is not in the original script. In fact, there are a lot of differences, like how Nikki is spelled differently. In the film, it's spelled Nikki, kind of like Mirai Nikki, the Romaji translation of the title of the manga and anime series Future Diary, which contains a character named Yuno Gasai, who is widely regarded as the poster girl of the obsessed girlfriend archetype in fiction. This may just be another coincidence, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was an intentional reference, given how all the characters in Obsession are painted in shades of gray, like you'll often see in Japanese stories, as opposed to the black and white, evil versus good structure most common in American films. And there was that whole moment of Nikki doing her best Sadako cosplay outside the car, so you know J-horror had to be an influence. Also, there was my possibly imagined connection to Ocarina. Hell, the wish thing itself, and the idea that it can only be used once per person, was almost like an inverted version of the concept of Code Geass. Throughout this video, I've gone over how every clinically recognized symptom of BPD is represented in Nikki's character and Indy's performance, making this probably the strongest portrayal of borderline that I've ever seen captured in a film. And that's coming from me, someone who basically watches horror movies for a living. I've also pointed out how audiences who have experienced the real thing firsthand were particularly affected by the movie, and there are even more powerful examples that I saved but didn't find a natural spot for in the video. Now, you may be wondering how I even knew to look for these things. And look, I'm not gonna say whether I have or have not gone out with a girl who had some level of BPD and related to some of the horror that is associated with that, but if I did, and if I was very upset and distraught over the way that I was treated, the best advice that I might have received would have been that it wasn't her that did those things, it was the disease in her head. And that's an idea that audiences seem to have latched onto with Nikki Freeman, because the real Nikki never wanted any of this. Remember to make my wishes come true by subscribing to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell and select all notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.